ready for today's episode?
I'm as ready as I can be. I'm really nervous as per usual.
Yeah, well, it's about to get real cold up in here because today's episode is about cryonics.
Cryonics?
Yeah, have you ever heard of cryonics before?
I have. I know very little about it. I've got like maybe some cursory knowledge.
Yeah, so it's the study of crying. I'm kidding. It is actually... They just make people really sad and like watch them cry. Just kidding. So it is actually the study of freezing people to potentially be brought back to life later in the future.
Like Futurama style.
Very much like that. Yeah. So I made something very special for today's episode.
Oh, terrific.
Something like a commercial for cryonics.
Oh my gosh.
So,
is this our first ad?
I think so, but it's not monetized. So does that count?
I mean, is it insider trading if I like invest in some cryonics companies right now? You know, play the ad first and then I'll make any financial decisions after I hear it.
Okay. All right. Well, here goes nothing. Do you like to think outside of the box? And by box, I mean coffin? Maybe typical funerals are too boring for you. Maybe you have an extra $220,000 that you just aren't sure what to do with. Or perhaps you enjoy paying taxes so much that you'd be willing to pay them twice. If this sounds like you, then you might consider cryonics. Cryonics is the practice or technique of deep freezing the bodies of people who just died, in the hope that scientific advances may allow them to be revived in the future. Because we can't actually do it right now. But, you know. Vladimir Putin used to put heads on stakes in his front yard, but now you can pay us 80 grand to put yours in liquid nitrogen. That's pretty cool, huh? Euthanasia is illegal though, so we'll have to wait for you to be pronounced legally dead. We also can't be held liable for any future issues, including frostbite, potential memory loss, or just straight up not working. But you'll be dead, so you won't know anyway.
God. That sounded real. That was not what I was expecting.
Dude, I'm crying.
Oh my...
I'm so glad you like this.
Gosh, Bailey, what the heck? When did you make that?
When did I make that? Like 2 nights ago.
I feel like I got a whole episode worth of cryonics information just right there. I feel like maybe I have an idea for the trajectory of the episode just based on some of that.
Yeah, definitely. So there was some information in there that I'm going to touch on for sure. Not so much Vladimir Putin, not related at all, but I just thought it would be funny.
We're not allowed to talk about Vladimir Putin or his brilliant political inclinations.
Yeah.
In the prosperous nation of Russia. Go on.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was my commercial for cryonics. So are you sold? Yes or no?
You know, as soon as I have a cool $250,000 sitting around, I am just like ready to invest. I mean, like I think I need some more specs for this. But
yeah, no, you're good.
At the very, very outline right here, I'm really excited to be doing another episode on death and after death care. So this is great. I promise everybody listening that we're doing fine. We don't have a fixation. We don't have a problem.
We're doing great. We're doing great over here. We just keep waking up. So
absolutely.
Let's start here. So cryonics is the practice of freezing an individual who has died with the intent of reviving them sometime in the future. So who the hell came up with this idea, right? Because he sounds crazy. Yeah. Well, that would be a guy named Robert Ettinger, who was a Michigan professor when he wrote The Prospect of Immortality in 1962. In April of 1966, the first human body was frozen, though it had been embalmed for 2 months, by being placed in liquid nitrogen and stored at just above freezing. The middle-aged woman from Los Angeles, whose name is unknown, was soon thawed out and buried by relatives.
Okay, pause. 2 months of being embalmed? And
Yes.
frozen under the notion that maybe they can bring her back from 3 gallons of formaldehyde?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, as a good friend of the podcast and skilled mortician, Emily would be able to tell you, is 2 months, I'm guessing, means she was probably at very best room temp, at very worst and likely embalmed a couple of times, right? Because I mean, we heard that Lincoln on the big post opera tour across the country was actually embalmed several times. So 2 months is
Right.
2 months is a long time to be dead.
It definitely is. And embalming and the process that they use for cryonics are completely different. And I'll touch on that later in the episode. But it was kind of like the guinea pig of this whole idea, I feel like, I don't know much about this woman or if she was like a willing participant.
Sure.
The fact that they let her thaw out and her relatives later buried her is kind of like that kind of makes me think like they weren't really into it.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
There might
I
have
don't
been
know.
a post-mortem custody battle of sorts going on, because that sounds like a roller coaster.
That could be.
And we have
Yeah.
the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever, which would be dig her up and freeze her.
Oh my God.
After being embalmed for over 50 years. She was frozen to be preserved for future generations' enjoyment.
Yeah. Just look at her. Okay.
Man, I said 2 months was a long time to be dead. I feel like most people are dead for at least that long and sometimes longer.
What do you mean? Like before decomp or like just in general?
Just in
like,
general.
You know what, Ethan? You have a point.
Yeah. All right. Moving along.
Okay, moving on. The first body to be cryopreserved and then frozen with the hope of future revival was that of James Bedford. Bedford's corpse is the only one frozen before 1974 that is still preserved today.
Ooh.
In 1976, Edinger founded the Cryonics Institute. Robert Nelson, who led the Cryonics Society of California, was sued in 1981 for allowing 9 bodies to thaw and decompose in the 1970s. In his defense, he claimed that the Cryonics Society had run out of money. This led to the lowered reputation of cryonics in the United States.
No way, it did?
Oh, no way.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Talk about a great example of you had one job.
You have...
You know, honestly, I would just
But the
say...
shareholders... I'm joking.
I would just say, you have no idea what kind of medical marvels exist in the brilliant and bright future. I mean, in the year 2000, being thawed out for a couple of weeks won't even be that big of a deal.
Yeah, there you go. Because it is the 1970s. And,
Yeah,
that's
they'll say,
when the
you know,
Jetsons was, right?
with the way the temperature's going up the globe over, our thawed out is going to be the future's ice cold anyway. So what's the big frickin' deal? Adapt, evolve.
What's the big deal? Yeah. As exciting as it may seem, cryonics is generally viewed as a pseudoscience by the scientific community. I was genuinely considering something like this for myself, but after reading up on it, Ethan,
Doesn't hold water?
I got cold feet.
That drum roll's so long.
It really is way too long.
I fully believed you.
You probably...
Oh my
You shouldn't
gosh.
believe anything I say, Ethan.
Well,
except for stuff that's like actually like sourced.
What kind of qualifier is that? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, but seriously, at this point in your research, you're no longer considering cryonics as preservation method after death.
I'm not. actually, because I mean, there are a lot of factors, and I'll kind of go into it later on. In my opinion, the cost of it is significant, and I think that I would rather use that money or give that money to my kids to live a life with, or potentially if they want to do it, they can. I just like, I'm not in a financial position to do something like this right now. So it seems very extra to me. However, I do think that if you have the means to do this, and it wouldn't be a burden on your family to do something like this. And I mean, because let's be honest, if it doesn't work out, you're already dead.
I mean,
Like, literally.
no, exactly.
So,
I mean, the worst thing that could happen is nothing. I mean, you've quite literally got nothing to lose. So I think it's a
exactly.
good, like, just, looking into the future, preventive sort of measure of preservation of legacy. Cryonics still holds water as a decent idea. I think it opens up some ground for incredibly alpha or sigma moves, such as putting on sunglasses when you're deceased and having a clear window in your cryonics chamber and just being like, wow, that guy's cool as hell. And they'll be like,
cool as
minus 300 degrees, as a matter of fact. I don't know how cold cryonics get. Oh my god. You can't use the soundboard twice.
Okay, am I being banned from the soundboard?
No, but that is a second flag. After that, you will get a formal warning, and 3 formal warnings, and you will receive a citation.
We'll get
And
hate
three,
mail.
Three of
Which,
those.
if you, yeah, if you want to write in hate mail or just say anything nice to us, that would be great too. You can write in to us at niche knowledge and nonsense at gmail.com.
Oh my gosh. We're not going to regret dropping
For real,
that.
though, yeah.
Okay. But go on, please.
Okay, sure. In 2018, a Y Combinator startup called Nectome was recognized for developing a method of preserving brains with chemicals rather than by freezing. The method is fatal, performed as euthanasia under general anesthesia, but the hope is that future technology would allow the brain to be physically scanned into a computer simulation, neuron by neuron. This kind of ties in with the brain in a vat discussion we had in the last episode where we talked about living in a simulation.
Interesting.
And yeah, so I kind of just included that in there because it tied together in some weird way.
It does, as everything's connected, as they say.
Yeah.
And I have some questions. If we happen to have any like neuroscientists listening in, I feel like if all the conductivity, like the actual electrical impulses or anything that are in the brain, if that really controls like our internal monologue and our memories and our sense of being, or if there is something physical that like a frozen brain, with the way, like, I don't know, how neurons arrange or anything like that, if there's a way that they could preserve memories structurally, because I always understood that it was, mostly electrical, and it was kind of,
Right.
ever presence until you die, and then it's all gone. So, like, if your brain went flat, no electricity jumping around, and then you were brought back to life, you'd have a clean slate. But I might be wrong. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know too much about the brain. I barely
No.
even have one.
Well, yeah, no, that's actually a great question. That's not something that I looked into for this episode. There
'Cause-
is some, because there hasn't been a lot of research done on this, we don't actually know if you would have your memories if you were to be brought back later on.
Functionally, like, I totally get the motivation to preserve like a brilliant beefcake body like mine for future generations. But if I'm going to be frozen and I'm going to lose all my memories and be resurrected as an extremely handsome 1-year-old, essentially, I don't feel like that's preserving life, I feel like I'm just getting a hard reset, and somebody else is getting to take advantage of my marble sculpted physique in the future, and that just seems strange. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about my future self. I don't know what this guy's political inclinations are. I don't know what kind of food this guy likes. It'd be interesting to see how me now versus me in the future would develop, to see, if there's a nature versus nurture kind of thing with literally transferring the same body into a future learned set. But that's probably beyond the scope of a Cryonics episode.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I thought about when I was reading about all of this, because we don't know that you would get the memories back. And in my opinion, it would be kind of scary
For sure.
to be like full sized and be brought back from the dead, and not remember anything at all.
No, it's horrifying to think about. You literally can't even imagine it. I also feel like I should frame the narrative of this. Keep referencing my big bronze-bodied sculpturous beefcake physique. Is that I look like 5 pencils and an olive cobbled together, and the olive is my massive bicep. Okay, now moving on.
Just one, though.
Well, just one. I don't want to work out both arms. That's twice the work. It's like a waste of time for me.
Oh my gosh. Euthanasia is actually a big factor as to why we haven't actually attempted to put someone in a state of cryostasis because of current laws. Assisted euthanasia on humans is illegal in the U.S., and it is possible that they could perform this on animals, but currently no studies have attempted to cryopreserve and revive whole animals because of legal issues, pessimism surrounding the practice, and shortage of cryonics expertise. However, let's keep in mind that some things that once started out as science fiction are now a real thing today. For example, the rocket. Imagination sparked innovation, and that's what happened to Robert H. Goddard, who became fascinated with spaceflight after reading a serialization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Because of that, he ended up building the first liquid-fueled rocket. One time, I had an idea of making a triple-decker PB&J because... because I didn't want to make 2 PB&J sandwiches.
I mean,
Ethan, do you have any innovative creations?
I don't know if I like to dream that big. Once I had put 3 slices of bread together, and I asked somebody if they know what this is, and I said a bread sandwich. They weren't impressed. It was a barista. It didn't work out.
Oh.
I don't know if I've ever had an idea that good. I'd have to look through my notes. I mean, when I was a small child, I thought that I could crack the code for a perpetual motion machine using magnets, as all small children of 7 or 8 do, and I thought I could name it ETH Energy after myself and solve a lot of the world's issues. I never exactly made a working model, but I did find that I was, in a way, in my own hyperactivity, a perpetual motion machine. And through the miracle of cryonics, I could preserve that abundant energy for future generations. So the future potential for ETH Energy is still out there as long as the miracle of cryonics is preserved.
That's a great name, too.
Thank you. I thought of it myself.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, would you want to start a cryonics business with me? Because I was thinking you have like all of those like forgotten mines in your neighborhood.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So we could just like put them all down there.
You just
just think about it.
Out me for mine subsidence. What if my insurance adjuster is listening to this?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Well, they're forgotten. So you can't prove that they're there. Right?
That's true. It's not trespassing if they don't know it exists.
That's true.
But I think with how much I struggle to be productive filming a casual conversational podcast, I might not be the best person to go into a tech-based theoretical startup with.
Hey, you never know.
You never
never
know.
know.
You never know
Just
what
think
the
about
future
it.
holds. I will check liquid nitrogen futures, and I will run some numbers, and I will get a business plan put together for you.
I do want to let you know. So we had just recorded the simulation episode.
Sure.
No. Yeah, we had just recorded the simulation episode. I start writing this one about cryonics, and I'm reading about the process of using liquid nitrogen. And then I am not joking, 2 days later, I'm driving, running errands with my kids in the car, and I drive by this liquid nitrogen truck.
What do you mean liquid
And I'm
nitrogen truck?
What the heck?
What does that
Like,
mean?
it was literally, like, it looked like
Like
it was about the size
transporting
of a
it?
cement truck.
Okay.
But it had liquid nitrogen in the back of it. And it had like a vent pipe coming out of the back. And there was like frost. Like there was like
I've never
frost over the
seen
pipe.
one of these. So
And then
that's
like it looked like steam, but it obviously very well could have been like cold.
well, absolutely. That is wild. I've never seen a liquid nitrogen truck. Like
Neither have I.
simulation, man. One more point.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. It's weird.
Yeah, all of this is fake, but maybe if we freeze ourselves, we can live long enough to find out.
Dude, you're real as hell. You're as real as it gets. Let's just put that out there. But-
Thanks, homie.
So, is it too far out of the realm of possibility to think that maybe someday we will be able to revive people from their cryosis and have them continue life in the future? Just thinking about this kind of is mind-melting for me. And I imagine that it would be lonely to be brought back at a time where none of your friends or family members would still be, unless they were also placed in cryostasis, which, by the way, you can share a cryotube with up to 3 other people. But another issue is that we don't know for sure that you would actually get your memories back once out of that state. But it's also incredibly scary for me to imagine that. I guess if you don't know anything, there's nothing to really miss, but still unnerving.
It is unnerving. I got a couple of questions. Number one, is this a coincidence that you are writing an episode on cryonics and diving into a future that is unknown with nobody you know, right the same month as Amazon Prime's hit original series Fallout comes out? Have you seen that yet?
We haven't seen it yet.
Okay,
No.
literally the
Have you guys
premise
started it?
is of Fallout, not so much the series, but like Fallout 4, the game, is people are frozen cryogenically for 200 years. Then the
Dude, I
main
had no
character,
idea.
thaws out, and everything has just gone to heck in a handbasket. It's like,
Dude.
and I don't know why everything went to heck in a handbasket. It could be because in the future, Dave Ramsey has passed away and people don't know how to attain financial peace. It could be for any number of those reasons. That's definitely a contributing factor, though. And that's literally one of the downsides of cryonics is on the downside, maybe it doesn't work. Also on the downside, maybe it does work and you wake up in a vivid hellscape.
I had no idea. I've never played Fallout. I never really looked into the game. The fact that that's like the premise of this show that just came out is wild.
Okay, so I'm going to start telling people if they don't know about Fallout, I'm going to say it's based on a true story. And they're going to say, really? And I'm like, I don't know. We don't fucking know yet. It takes place in the future.
Right.
It could be.
So, yeah. Okay, so I do want to touch on like why I chose this topic.
Sure.
Not because of Fallout. I haven't seen that. And some of our listeners seem to think that I'm obsessed with death. And at this point, I'm not really sure that this is helping me out. So in March, my husband Adam and I went to Colorado and toured the Stanley Hotel. We did 2 tours while we were there. They offer the Shining tour, which is where they talk about Stephen King getting the inspiration for the story or the novel, The Shining. And then the second tour that we did was the Frozen Dead Guy tour. So while we're standing there waiting around for a tour guide to come find us in the lobby area, we found out that it was we were the only ones on the Frozen Dead Guy tour. So it was just us and this tour guide on this Frozen Dead Guy. So we had a very one-on-one experience with this individual. I forget his name. He was super smart, funny.
This sounds so awkward. This is like my
I know,
nightmare.
And it could have been completely awkward,
Sure.
but it was so much fun, and I was able to ask a lot of questions and like, do you like your job? Like, do you live around here? Just like to like get to know him and also do the normal tour stuff that we paid for. But
Sure.
I do. Yeah. So after, we're walking around the Stanley Hotel property. He takes us to a shed type building, unlocks the door, we get inside, and he introduced us to Grandpa Burrito. And Adam and I asked Adam and the tour guide, like as soon as we walked in the room, I was like, shh, do you guys hear that? And they're like, what? And they're like looking around to hear it, and I'm like, help me. I was like, oh my God, it's the Frozen Dead Guy.
I cannot believe Adam goes anywhere with you.
He is at a loss 24/7.
I would have been like, I have no words. Go on, though.
That was me testing the water to see like what kind of jokes I could make with this guy.
Right.
The tour.
Right. I'm sure it only went up from there. Dial back. They took you into the room where the dead guy was frozen, like preserved. Mm-hmm. Can you you can see it?
Yeah. So I'm going to continue. Okay. So the shed type building actually used to be the original, or was the original ice house for the Stanley Hotel. And there's this company called Alcor. They moved this guy, Grandpa Burrito, to the Stanley Hotel in I think 2023. I could be wrong. It was around that time.
Sure, recently.
Yeah, recently, within the last 5 years. And they come and like manage his cryo tube, fill it with liquid nitrogen, I think like once a month or whatever. But we walked in, and like the first thing you see when you walk in is this giant tube, and it says Alcor on it, and that's where this guy is. They had a display of, it looked very similar to a coffin, but it was an area where there was like a dummy in it, and it explained the process of vitrification, which is actually done for cryosis or cryostasis. So they don't just freeze you. They complete this process called vitrification. And I'll kind of touch more in that later, but they pump all the blood out of the body and put in like a chemical to help prevent cells from freezing. Yeah. So they had like a display of that. And if you guys are interested, I do have pictures of this that I'm going to upload to our Instagram page. You can find us at NKNPod. And see pictures of where Grandpa Burrito is. They had one that you could stand in. So I am 5'1", and these tubes are like 6.5 feet tall, if not more. They're probably more like 7 feet tall. So I look very small in them.
How did it feel
so it was
to
super cool.
stand in one of the tubes? Was it like eerie?
It was very eerie. I guess it would be similar to like laying in a coffin, which I've never done. But I did feel strange doing it, especially standing next to one that had a person in it. Mm-hmm. It was very interesting, though, to learn about the process and the future of cryonics, or, said future. They do actually wrap the bodies in a sleeping bag of some sort and put them in upside down. So their head is in the bottom and your feet are at the top.
What's the function of putting people upside down?
So I'm going to touch on that later.
Okay.
So what I want to do now is, so do you have any questions before I...
I mean, is the reason just because it'd be extremely funny if there was a little porthole window at eye level and you go and clear the condensation off and you just see a big old foot? Because I think that's extremely humorous and a little erotic. But we can move on.
Did you say ironic or erotic?
Next question, please.
Okay. So I'm going to go into the story of how Grandpa Burrito ended up at the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel now has the world's only cryonics museum in the world.
Oh my gosh. Okay. It's fitting.
That was a big factor.
I think. I mean, if you know how The Shining ends, one of the famous last clips, a terrific camera
the last
shot.
Clips.
Yeah,
There you go. And if you haven't seen it, you've had 50 years to watch it,
yeah, we can
right?
spoil it.
So,
but somebody gets flippin'
You're
frozen.
Yeah, they were frozen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, probably solid because they looked pretty crispy.
Okay, so in 1989, a Norwegian citizen named
the Taylor
Trygve
Swift album. Go
Bog. Oh, God. Do not bring T Swift up in this podcast, Ethan.
Okay, why would you say 1989 if it wasn't an obvious nod to Taylor Swift? But please proceed.
In 1989, a Norwegian citizen named Trygve Bog brought the corpse of his recently deceased grandfather, Brito Morstel, to the United States. I also apologize if I'm butchering any of these pronunciations.
Absolutely. We apologize. Is that Italian?
I'm Norwegian.
Norwegian? Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess. I don't know. I'm a dumb American.
Apologize to any Norwegians, and also I want to toss in an apology for the rude things I said about the ginger population. Now, please go on. Please go on.
Don't apologize. They deserve it.
Yeah, that's right.
Out,
they
Ethan.
fucking do. Okay.
Okay. So he brought the corpse of his grandfather from Norway to the U.S. The body was preserved on dry ice for the trip and stored in liquid nitrogen in the TransTime Cryonics facility in San Leandro, California, from 1990 to 1993.
Okay.
Are you following?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of. This is a storied past, but I'm with you so far.
Okay. In 1993, Brito was returned to dry ice and transported to the town of Nederland, Colorado, where Trygve and his mother Odd planned to create a cryonics facility of their own. When Trygve was deported from the U.S. for overstaying his visa, his mother Odd continued keeping her father's body cryogenically frozen in a shack behind her unfinished house, and was eventually evicted from her home for living in a house with no electricity or plumbing, in violation of local ordinances.
Oh,
at that time,
typical HOA getting in everyone's business.
Right. At that time, she told a local reporter about her father's body, and those of two other individuals and the reporter went to the local city hall in order to let them know about Odd's fears that her eviction would cause her father's body to thaw out.
And that became everybody's chief concern, I would imagine.
Yes.
So I've got so many peripheral questions, but please just go on.
Yeah, okay. No, it just keeps going, Ethan.
Okay.
It just keeps going.
Real quick. I have so many questions on rules on I don't know, proper handling of a corpse that I wish I'd looked into a little bit more, with some of the body snatching stuff that we covered in a past episode, because I didn't know you were really allowed to just keep a corpse with you, that wasn't cremated in an urn. I guess if it's embalmed, I don't know if there are laws on how quick you have to have a funeral.
I'm not sure. I mean, if he was coming from Norway to the US, he would have had to have gone through customs. So I'm sure he had to pay somebody to help him get his grandfather to the US, but I don't actually know.
For sure.
That's
a
a
nice
good-
weekend
yeah.
at Bernie's incident. They take him in to get his passport photo, and it's just like. Look at that chill
Right.
dude. Getting his photo. He don't look so hot, man. He looks a little pale, man. Glad he's going to California and getting some sun, because that dude looks unwell.
Dude, they're all pale from Norway. You know that?
Dude, you know that's where the Vikings come from. They came from Norway over the ships. I don't know why that went from California into Bob's Burgers. I apologize. But go on.
We're dumb Americans. According to an article in the Denver Post in 1995, Odd Morstall was found guilty by a jury of building use and zoning violations. The Nederland town judge ordered her to remove the frozen body of her father from Nederland by March 6th or face 10 days in jail and a $600 fine. Keep in mind, Trygve and Odd are now both out of the U.S., but they didn't leave before hiring caretaker Brad Wickham, also known as the Iceman, who was tasked with keeping Morstall's body chilled. For nearly 2 decades. 2 decades,
20
Ethan.
years, for those who don't know what a decade
20
is.
years. Wickham drove to Denver every 2 weeks to buy dry ice, purchasing more than half a ton of blocks to drive to the shed, located on the family's property, and placed it on Morstall's metal casket, which was also displayed in the museum.
Okay. This is a lot of production to keep one person on ice. Like, my gosh.
Yeah. And it wasn't thin ice either.
Oh my gosh. So at this point,
Yeah.
they really just have him in a metal casket in a shack, and they're just piling dry ice around him. This is the rich history of cryonics I was looking for.
So, yeah, well, this is the history of how Grandpa Brito ended up at the Stanley Hotel.
Sure.
So it's a little bit off topic, but it still kind of touches on it because this is kind of like how I got the inspiration to write or cover this as an episode.
For sure. And we're assuming that, and I guess Alcor, is that the name of the company, is assuming that the chain of custody on keeping this guy frozen up until the point they were able to get him into like a formal metal liquid nitrogen tube was good enough, reputable enough, dependable enough. They trusted the Iceman to keep him chilled, that it's worth preserving him, I'm assuming, indefinitely. They think he's still intact.
So funny that you bring that up. We don't know for sure. The tour guide at the Stanley Hotel told us that the people who moved this guy from the tin casket that he was in to this cryo tube said that he was looking a little rough.
Oh.
Which, keep in mind, this guy was in his late 80s.
So he probably
was
wasn't looking terrific before he passed.
in the first place.
Yeah.
And dry ice is like maybe good for temporary use, but not for like 20 years.
I mean, I've seen some like year-old pork steaks in my freezer that like don't look so hot. Like, you know, they fall into the back, you pull them out, and that's a year, you know, under consistent,
Right.
dependable 0-degree temperature. So I could imagine 20 years, you said he was on dry ice. I could imagine he was a little dried out, at least.
Yes. Which I stopped and thought about this for a moment. Imagine being Brad Wickham, like this Iceman. Like, I thought of like if you and Kayla came up to me and you were like, so like we're gonna leave the country. Could you help us keep,
Our grandpa, our father.
our grandpa's body on dry ice and just like keep refilling it, like just keep pouring it on top. Like I would assume that you're joking.
Yeah.
I would not think that you're being serious at all.
No, and imagine that, decades ago. I think we're in a more accepting generation now, but hell, I groan if somebody asks if I can drive them to the airport. Like, spend 20 years
Right.
keeping your father on dry ice.
Right. Yeah. So the Iceman knew that the process was unsustainable. Plus, he had the perfect residence for Morstel, an obsolete building once used to store ice from the nearby pond to refrigerate the hotel's food and beverage. So Odd wrote the local paper and it became a sensation. In response, the city added a broad new provision to its municipal code. Keeping of bodies, outlawing the keeping of the whole or any part of the person, body, or carcass of a human being or animal or other biological species which is not alive upon any property. However, because of the publicity that had arisen, they made an exception for Peepaw Burrito, or rather, a literal grandfather clause. Trigby secured the services of Delta Tech, a local environmental company, to keep the cryonic facility running. Bo Schaefer, CEO of Delta Tech, was known locally as the Iceman and caretaker responsible for transporting the dry ice necessary for cryopreservation to the IC Institute, something he's done since 1995. In that year, the local tough shed supplier and a Denver radio station built a new shed in which to store the body of Brito. In the fall of 2012, Jane Curtis Gazette and Mike Wooten took over as Brito's caretakers, but they passed caretaking duties to Brad Wickham, who is the current caretaker. So it did this whole
This is like the book
circle.
of Genesis, just like they have this.
Literally,
they have this whole
and so had the son.
Exactly. I cannot believe anywhere they turn, there's a small company or a person who's just like, yeah, I'll keep them frozen. That's not a problem. We'll put up a shed. A radio station?
Right.
Like, people are committed to this.
They really are.
Go on, but I'm just like, I'm blown away by the spirit of collaboration to keep Brito on ice. This is amazing.
Right. In honor of the town's unique residents, Nederland holds an annual celebration, first started in 2002. Organizers announced the 2023 iteration would be canceled, stating Nederland refuses to work with the festival's current owners again.
Oh my gosh.
For 2023, the festival was moved to Estes Park, which was continued into 2024. So this whole community of people came together to care for this frozen dead guy, and they started this annual celebration called the Frozen Dead Guy, is what they called it.
What?
Which is
so tactful. I love it.
Right, which is why the Stanley Hotel calls it the Frozen Dead Guy Tour.
This is
so
I love it. There couldn't be better branding on that. It's succinct. It tells you exactly what you're getting into.
Right. Well, they have all sorts of games and stuff, casket carrying races.
Oh my gosh.
Groups of people doing that. All sorts of odd things that are super funny, but
gonna get some
it eventually
kids with really dark senses of humor.
Yeah. And but there were so many people coming from all over that this little town could not sustain it anymore. And I guess there was some drama that happened with the current owners of the festival or whoever was running it. So it moved to Estes Park, which is where the Stanley Hotel is located. In August 2023, it was time for G-Paw Burrito to get an upgrade. With Trigby's permission, he was moved by a team from Alcor, driven to the Stanley Hotel's old ice house in Estes Park, where he was submerged headfirst in liquid nitrogen. His home is now the world's only museum dedicated to the science of cryonics, which is actually the original ice house at the Stanley Hotel that was built in 1909. So that's the story of Grandpa Burrito. The rest of the tour was all information on Alcor. the company that currently keeps him frozen. They come and fill the tank with liquid nitrogen like once a month. And there's like a whole wall of people who utilize their service or are already making payments to use it. And it felt very cultish.
Right.
Because the majority of these people were very wealthy.
Sure. Sure. I mean, billionaires trying to break into immortality,
Right.
Surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain ways to go about it. I think that Brian Johnson guy famously is trying to live forever or age backwards, whatever it is, the tech millionaire. That's one way to do it, is by eating a lot of ground flaxseed. Another way is to dive headfirst into a vat of liquid nitrogen. So you can really like pick your own poison, so to speak. But that's amazing. So as you're going through this tour, did it kind of feel like it was an ad for Cryonics? Like, did they try to like sales pitch you on anything, or like present it as, well, here's something you could do? Alternative funerals are catching on. Some people like to be buried in a burlap sack with a tree planted on top. Some like to be pressed into a diamond. Some like to be frozen in a tube.
I definitely kind of got that feeling, not from our tour guide. He was very much like outside of it and was just giving us like information, like just regurgitating stuff that he already knew.
Sure.
We actually were not allowed to record him because he's under copyright law, or he claimed to be.
Interesting.
Which was interesting, and I don't know if that has to do with the Stanley Hotel or if it has to do with Alcor.
I don't know. It sounds like kind of a shady Big Brother-like institution. I feel like Alcor sounds really intense. It also sounds like they might just be rolling in and pouring liquid into a tube. And, It sounds futuristic. There's a strong possibility that it may be not. I don't know anything about Alcor. I don't want to disparage their good name or neutral name or bad name, because I don't have a strong opinion in either direction, and thus cannot be held legally responsible for any perceived slight. Love you, Alcor.
True.
So anyway, this is really interesting, and I'm looking forward to getting to the part where like why they're frozen doing a handstand. So
right.
let's keep going.
Okay, yeah. So a couple extra things just from the tour at the Stanley. We learned that it costs $200,000 for your entire body to be preserved, but only $80,000 just for your head.
Oh my gosh!
Just to your head for $80,000. And then I was digging into this, and I found out that not specific to Alcor, but worldwide, there are about 500 people who are currently cryonically preserved.
500?
500.
I don't know if that's low or high. In my mind, that's more than I expected.
It was way more than I anticipated, because from what I knew, there were around 200 at Alcor, and they're based out of Arizona.
Oh, Alcor is
in the US.
carrying almost half the global burden on cryogenically preserved people. That's nuts.
So there are, and they call it cryosleep. There are 300 in cryosleep in the U.S., roughly 50 people in Russia, around 100 in Europe.
And that's just the Siberians.
And more than 30 pets in Arizona.
Oh, are they counting pets in this total? That's very interesting.
Apparently, because you can preserve your pet, which to me just...
I mean, we already found out that people have their pets embalmed with them or buried with them or cremated with them, so why not have them frozen with you as well?
There you go.
Definitely. I mean, I've kept some cats in the freezer a few days, definitely, in the past, like after they pass away, like so you can get everyone together for like a funeral.
Okay.
But I wonder what the price of preserving like an animal would be. Probably about the same amount as a human head. So I'm guessing about 80 G's, which I love my cats. They're a part of my family. Like if I thought there was a chance I could preserve them until a future where they figure out how to make a cat live forever like a lobster can, I would do it. I would pay it. But
Yeah.
so also that means there's somebody in charge of pouring liquid nitrogen. Somebody drew the short straw and is in charge of cutting people's heads off.
Yes.
The workflow of this company is insane. Alcor, you are bringing it.
They really are. It's insane. It's insane to think about.
It really is. It really is. I mean, I need a job title for this person. I'm going to refer to him as a decapiteur.
A decapiteur?
Yes. That's what we're going with.
I feel like it would be a great job for someone who used to work in a slaughterhouse and wants to cut up humans. Like they just escalated to wanting to...
Hey kid, you want to chop up humans? Well, get right in line over here and work at Alcor. Cryogenically preserved humans. You can cut off a head and get paid for it.
It just cost an arm and a leg. All right, so...
What do they do with the rest of the body when they cut the head off?
You know what? I was just thinking that, and I don't know. They probably eat it. So...
Once
they have a buffet in the break room.
This is a comedy podcast, and we do not mean any offense to the Alcor company.
No, please don't come at us. Don't come at me.
Yeah. You know,
whatever.
We love here at NKN Pod, we love cannibals and cannibalism and
and they do too because they preserve your body in cans.
Yeah, so. Exactly. There we go.
There we go. We came full circle.
We really did. We figure it all out here.
Yeah. Okay. Many people have the idea that cryonics is just freezing a body, but it's technically a process called vitrification, which is the process of freezing so rapidly that the water molecules don't have time to form ice crystals, and instead instantaneously solidify into a glass-like structure. Ice crystals will damage cells, which would make it difficult to bring someone back. You know when you leave chicken breast in the freezer and it forms ice crystals that build up all over?
Do I ever?
You don't want to eat that if it's been in there too long because it damages the cells and it can make it have a rubbery consistency.
Yeah, so those cannibal connoisseurs over at Alcor know that they have to be able to avoid this, vitrification? What?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
For sure.
So after death has been legally declared, the body will be stabilized to supply the brain with enough oxygen and blood to preserve minimal function. It will then be packed in ice and injected with heparin, an anticoagulant, to prevent blood clots. Water will then be removed from the cells of the body and replaced with a glycerol-based chemical called cryoprotectant or human antifreeze.
You know,
yep.
I am just absolutely lambasting Alcor when there's some chemical company out there selling human antifreeze. And you know what's wild about these MFers is nobody has any way of evaluating whether or not their stuff works. And guess what?
Right.
If you're going to be frozen for 200 years, why does it matter to you? Fraud the hell out of these people, you know? Like, 200 years down the road, I guess my great-great-great-great-grandson, who's a freaking billionaire from human antifreeze, can catch the heat for my crime. I'm going to sell bottles of that stuff.
Right.
You know, there's apparently a lot of money to be made in this cryosleep business.
I mean, honestly, but you do have to consider how much you're paying for the facility.
Sure.
How much energy costs.
That's true. And it's a one-time fee, not even like everything as a service model. They haven't figured out like a monthly charge or something yet. I'm going to get my people to talk to their people because I have some innovations that they could make.
There you go. I hope they at least use some like solar energy.
They're going to have to figure
Arizona.
out something. I mean, I guess you could just, invest that $200,000 in some quality mutual funds, if we're aiming to bring like 8.25 to 12%, annually. That could add up over the years, especially over 200 years. I don't know.
I often wonder too what happens when you run out of space. Like a cemetery, once you run out of space, you're not bringing in any more income and the bodies are just stuck there. So what happens with that?
Yeah, I don't know if it
actually
like
know.
pulls into some kind of trust. That's probably a good question. Maybe they just purchase, like, finance some more land and just build a new one. And, after 1,000 years, a cemetery basically, you know, it's going to be a fossil. I mean, the U.S.,
Right.
we've only been chilling over here for like, 300-ish years. I mean, there's already some
Yeah.
like abandoned, almost fossil level cemeteries you can find where you're like, a lost grave artifact, let's dig it up. Hey, arrowheads, let's dig up these Native American graves. Like, at
Should
some
we?
point stuff just gets lost.
It really does. Should we just like start digging in your basement like that one lady did on TikTok and see if we can find
Oh
those
my
abandoned
gosh,
mines?
the mine shaft
What
lady.
what would you do if you dug far enough that you found these supposed mines and you found like bodies like in the catacombs
I don't.
of
Well, if I
things?
had grand notions of digging a private mine shaft now, I don't, because that's horrifying. I don't like to think of dead people under my house, to be honest. I mean,
No.
sometimes if I'm like swimming in a muddy pond, I'll think of like Poltergeist, where the skeletons are like popping up in the muddy water, and that freaks me out enough. I don't want to think that I'm sleeping on a skeleton. That's
I think they
horrifying.
use real skeletons for that.
Dude, I heard that they did use real skeletons.
I
Oh
feel
man.
like I just learned that a couple weeks
I know
ago.
hardly anything about skeleton culture too. Like, I know like the bones are their money, so are the worms, and if they catch you, they'll pull your hair up but not out. Because if it they pull it out, they'll turn to bones. It's a whole thing.
What?
It's really complicated. You'll get it someday.
Oh, they are real skeletons.
Wait, in
Some of
in
them are real.
graves?
In
No,
the
wait. Oh, poltergeist. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
The body will then be cooled on dry ice until it reaches negative 130 degrees Celsius, at which point it will be placed into a container inside a larger metal tank, which will be filled with liquid nitrogen to keep the body at a temperature of around 100, or rather, negative 196 degrees Celsius. The body is wrapped in a sleeping bag of some sort and placed in the cryotube upside down. This is to prevent any potential damage if the power supply and backup supply were ever to not work. In the event that the atmosphere warms inside of the cryotube and the body begins to defrost, you would want your feet to be the first to go, not your head. This is because the brain is extremely fragile, and if it were to be damaged, would increasingly reduce the chance of any potential resurrection. Maybe in the future we could replace feet, but I guess they could just save the brain if too much of it had gone.
Hey, I guess that makes sense. So I don't know like the nature of how like liquid nitrogen maybe like dissolves or something, but the idea is that if there's a liquid level leak or something like that, the head is the last thing that would be exposed.
Right.
So you might be surprised when you wake up 1,000 years from now and you paid for a whole body preservation and you're like, what the heck? I'm just a head, but I paid the full 200 G's. I should get the difference back. $120,000 should be refunded instantly, which, hey, in the future, that's going to be enough to buy
Yeah,
like
it
3
should.
Hershey bars.
And they should, match up with inflation so that 200 grand in 2024 matches up to the 2,224. How would you say that? How would you say that, Dave? 2224.
2224
I
or
don't know.
something like that. So just plugging this into calculator.net, I can see that over the course of 200 years at like a 3% inflation rate would be somewhere in the neighborhood of like $73 million. So,
Holy cow.
we'll have to consider that when calculating payouts.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's insane.
It is. It's wild. Invest now. In 200 years, you might be rich.
Or still dead. You never know.
That's all up to Alcor. one of the premier companies in cryogenic preservation.
True. So is this legit or science fiction? Well, that's the big debate, right? So according to Gary Bryant, he is an associate dean of physics at RMIT and an expert in cryobiology. He states, quote, "We've been able to preserve certain types of cells since the 1950s. To cryopreserve cells, we actually have to add a toxic cryoprotectant. Typically, it's a molecule called DMSO or another one called glycerol. And what these do is they get inside of the cells, and then when you cool them down, instead of ice forming, they form a glass inside the cell." End quote. So what about human bodies? He goes on and continues, quote, "We can't yet cryopreserve even a very simple organ. So even the liver, which has one type of cell, we can't preserve. Part of the issue is that this cryoprotectant needs to get into the whole organ, into the cells, right in the middle. And by the time it's done that, the toxicity has killed all the cells on the outside." End quote. Moreover, Bryant states that to preserve an entire human body, you'd need to cater to the unique needs of each type of cell. He goes on and says that every cell is different. Quote, "For example, with red blood cells, you've basically got to plunge it straight into liquid nitrogen for it to survive. Whereas with white blood cells, you have to cool it really, really slowly to get the same effect." End quote. So he says there's all sorts of exciting avenues for the use of cryobiology, even if preserving humans might not be one of them. He claims that it could also aid in the treatment of common cancer. He's personally investigating how to cryopreserve platelets, which are used in transfusions for people with cancer. Platelets only last around 4 to 5 days, so supplies have to be constantly replenished with donations, resulting in wastage. And if Bryant and his team can figure out a way to cryopreserve platelets, that could potentially streamline that whole process for everyone and reduce waste.
So are the scientists, like, just based off what you said right there, basically confirming that there's no way that cryogenic preservation companies, or like cryonics in general, is effectively preserving the human body? That there's just no chance it's really working out?
That's why the whole scientific community kind of sees this as a pseudoscience, because it's too close to science fiction right now, because we don't have the technology that we need yet to even have that be a possibility.
Sure, it's heavy-handed.
So
we're like trying to scramble an egg with a rocket launcher. Like, it's... I get it. But on the devil's advocate side, like, which of course is Alcor advocate, they're saying we don't know what the future holds. Maybe in the future they know how to, reverse all of this if we've frozen the structures.
Right. And like, I watched several videos of Alcor, kind of like trying to sell and like show off their facility. And it kind of made me feel like I got the ick. That doesn't happen to me very often. Just because I feel like I've kind of like desensitized myself to so many things.
No.
But the thing that really got to me was that they don't call death. They don't refer to people in the cryotubes as dead. They just say that they're in cryo sleep.
And that's one of the elements of just being very cult-like, is a denial to use terminology like post-life, death, whatever.
Exactly. Yes. And I started, like, I had to pause the video a couple times because I was just so kind of grossed out by it all. Because let's not sugarcoat it.
Sure.
Like, don't be selling something if it's not actually a thing. It's one thing to say, like, we don't have the technology now, but we can keep your body in liquid nitrogen to hopefully bring back. But in this case, it's more of like almost saying that like they can absolutely do this. Like, they don't call it death.
Sure.
They called it like
Cryo
the
sleep,
big
the
sleep.
big sleep.
And like cryo sleep. And it's
The
like,
big sleep in the sky.
yikes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is kind of dubious to say the very least, which I mean like big shocker, whatever. But this also wouldn't be the first time we had to break a few eggs to make an omelet. You know, like I feel
Right.
like the conversation and the efforts put behind cryonics right now might lead to future innovations when a different company pops up and says, this isn't maybe the way we should go about it. We should go about this preservation method because it's cheaper or because it's more founded in science, whatever it is. It's like, you know, when the only electric cars widely commercially available was like a Nissan Leaf or a Tesla, you know, there wasn't a lot of competition. If you wanted a fast, amazing electric car, you went with a Tesla. And because of that, we got amazing companies like Rivian. We got amazing cars like the Lucid Air. Like everybody has an electric car now and they're all pretty flipping awesome. So having like
Exactly.
an outlandish idea and just really chasing it hard, putting a lot of money and a lot of talent behind it can often lead to ripple effects that end up with something that's absolutely amazing. So there could be a bright future in, you know, cryo sleep.
Yeah, and I actually went on the next paragraph that I have right here is so is cryonics possible at all for humans? Within the next 20 to 30 years, it's highly unlikely. But if our science continues to advance at the rate that it has, even within the last 200 years, it may not be totally out of the realm of possibility for it to be possible in another 200 years. I understand that my knowledge on this subject is very, very minimal and basic. I am not a medical professional, nor am I a scientist. But even looking back at how battle wounds were treated in the Civil War and versus how they're treated now are drastically different. Instead of limbs being completely removed from a gunshot wound, we now have surgeons who can use robots to perform and assist in surgeries. We even have technology now that can help prosthetics for people who do lose their limbs. So I kind of like am like, okay, I get it. Like, so we're going to put these people in cryosleep or whatever. And just let them sit until we, you know, supposedly have the technology to bring them back. Which is kind of, you know, the whole point, whatever. But it is interesting to think about just even the scientific and technological advances within the last 200 years.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean,
Alone.
if you go back to World War II and you showed them a picture of some of like the cyber integration prosthetics that exist now, they'd be freaked out. They'd be like, that's the $6 million man, you know, that's a cyborg. Like, it would blow people's minds. We have amazing stuff.
Right.
Now, I do not think, and I'll go on record saying this, in the future when you're going through all this archived rando media or something, you'll find this and you can make fun of it, whatever. I do not think preserving the human body is actually, after death at least, is going to be the hot topic of the future. I think since we already have people sending tweets from brain implanted microchips, we're way more likely going to be using some kind of electronic device or prosthesis to read brain waves, find those neural pathways and structures and memories and contextualizations, and back those up synthetically to say we're preserving somebody's essence of their being and their consciousness and their personality rather than just their body. A body can be negotiated later. In fact, like I look at Boston Dynamics stuff, they can make amazing robots that move so organically. They can jump, they can dance, they can do stuff I can't even do in my incredible athletic form. So I think we're much more likely over the next 100 years to figure out how to preserve people's minds and put that into a synthetic body, if we deem that necessary at all, than we are to figure out how to freeze somebody and reverse aging at some point in the future. Because I'm also guessing right now most cryonics customers are probably older, end of life, or maybe very ill.
Yes.
So you're going to be reviving a body that's 90 years old and has deceased, or a body that succumbed to cancer. You can't euthanize a healthy 30-year-old person so that you have an ideal body to bring back in a few hundred years when you figure it all out. There's too many variables that I think we're already this close to solving via technology. So I just don't think that, the futurist in me doesn't think this is the right pathway.
No, I don't think so either. And it's also really hard because the vitrification process is toxic to the human body, like the chemicals in that. So I don't know. It could be one of those things where it's like, oh, we froze all of these people and they've been waiting and we prepared their bodies, but we should have used this instead because now those people can't be brought back. You know what I mean? And that happens. That's just part of scientific advances and like living and learning.
Exactly.
I guess.
And I mean, there's a certain amount of human elasticity. Like, got microplastics in my grain, making Legos in my brain, stacking, and I'm insane. Like we can figure out a way to survive whatever that heparin anticoagulant, whatever you said that was, it's whatever.
So, okay, the last thing here. There's an independent article that came out in 2021 that talks about scientists in Japan who have succeeded in reviving tardigrade animals, which had been collected in Antarctica in 1983. They were removed from moss collected and stored at negative 20 degrees Celsius. They were successfully unfrozen in May of 2014. These creatures, known as water bears or moss piglets, are minuscule, water-dwelling extremophiles measuring less than 1 millimeter in length and dwelling in extreme and hostile conditions. They're capable of slowing down or shutting down their metabolic activities for considerable periods of time. So while this seems like a promising beginning, these creatures are not as complex as a human's body, which only makes this more difficult to achieve in a larger scale. But as far as any articles or experiments, this is the only one that's been made public. It was also not vitrification at all. It was just freezing these little guys for 30-ish years, and they ended up coming back.
Okay, so water bears specifically, I think, were a hot topic over the last 20 years because, I don't know, they're built to survive that. Like they're completely different from us. They can thrive on the flipping, moon for a while. Those little suckers, super cute, are basically invincible. I feel like that's as much like carrying as much water as like, oh, human beings don't really roll down a hill very efficiently, but softballs really do. So if we can find a way to squish humans into a softball shape, then they'll roll better. So I don't know. Maybe
they're just, you can't compare the two.
I'm always ranting about like cell division in lobsters is actually bordering on perfect. So they technically have like basically no DNA loss is my understanding. Like when their cells divide, so a lobster can in theory live forever until they get so big that they're irresistible to a bigger predator in the sea and they get eaten, or they, end up in I don't know, King Triton's court. I guess a little Sebastian crab, whatever it is. So there maybe I'm being too harsh on this. There are avenues that we can learn from the animal kingdom and study those compounds and those structures to enhance humanity. But a lot will change over the next couple hundred years. And I think there's probably more stock in that than the blind hope that we'll be able to thaw people out in the future.
Right. Because my luck, I'm going to come out looking weird. And
absolutely. I think that's what your parents said after you were born the first time.
Born the first time? Oh my God,
That made more
Ethan.
sense in my head.
That's hilarious. No, it made
Okay,
sense.
good.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I didn't really want to touch on like the moral or ethical issues of cryonics. I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory. Um, but yeah, but did you have any thoughts?
No, I
Like what did you Yeah, that's cryonics.
absolutely. And I mean, I
So,
apologize that maybe I didn't roll into this with as open of a mind as I could have. And if anybody is really gung ho on this, you do your thing. You know, there's always going to be people more educated than I am on any given topic. And if that's something that gives you hope at the end of your life or that gives you peace at the end of your life, then maybe there's a certain amount of value in that. If you've saved really hard for your entire life so you can afford $200,000 so when you're on your deathbed you can pass away with the hope that you're going to be able to participate in a better future, a kinder future, a more powerful future, then, you know, maybe that's some of the end of life comfort that you need. So in that sense, cryonics could be an effective placebo in making the, you know, end of life experience better for a person. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. People find comfort in all sorts of things that are difficult to justify or explain. You know, everybody's experience is a little bit different. That being said, I will not be investing $250,000 into having myself frozen head first, but you know, to each their own.
yeah,
Not going to yuck somebody's yum, and we all know how yum Alcor feels about frozen people.
that's right. I
I
definitely
don't want to be a
agree. If
popsicle.
it
Where would they put the stick?
Ethan.
Okay.
Oh my God. No, that was really good. That was good.
Thank you.
I definitely agree if it helps you sleep better at night or cuz I know like existence is hard. The idea of this being our one and only life, there is no afterlife. Like that's a lot. That's
It's
very
tough.
daunting. Or if you follow a religion where you do believe that, um you have that to look forward to. But then my question is, let's say you die and you go to heaven, and then you're put back in your body after 200 years because they revived your body.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a flippin' Morgan Freeman movie or something like that. Write that down. That's a
What would you
decent. That's
do,
a
Ethan?
decent script. I mean, it sounds like a Ricky Gervais film. You know, he goes to heaven, and
Yeah.
then they're like, "You have to leave," and he's like, "What?" And finds out he's being revived,
Yeah.
and then it's like a freaking hellscape on Earth. Finds out he still has to live like a new, new clean slate moral life to get back to.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
sheesh,
actually
that's
made me
huge.
think of the Disney movie Soul. I watched it with my kids like a year ago, and it was really good. Have you
I have
seen it?
not. It's been on my list for a long time.
I think you and Kayla would really like it. It's a very sweet movie, but it's kind of that where it's a soul going to Earth to exist from there. That's what it just kind of made me think of.
Sure.
I don't know. But
And I mean, you know, a lot of religions also dabble with the idea of a soul of, you know, an eternal presence coming to Earth to experience things that way. So I think there's a certain
right.
framework of understanding that a lot of people are somewhat familiar with, you know, whether or not you're comfortable with it. But I don't know. I don't know. Some people are even against cremation. You know, some people are mausoleum only. There's all kinds of thoughts on how the end of times go. And you know, if you just die and you end up in the ground, well, that's been most people throughout most nations for most of history. So yeah, you won't
Right.
be alone down there.
True. Yeah.
No, this was
So
this was
that
huge, and I really I appreciate how much deep diving you did into like the economic structures of this sort of like, you know, post life preservation ecosystem, and you answered most of the questions that I had. So I'm happy to have this one in the books, preserved for the enjoyment of future audiences.
Yeah. And maybe even in the next 200 years after you wake up from cryo
It could be. And if you're waking up from cryo sleep 200 plus years from now, shoot us an email at nicheknowledgeandnonsense@gmail.com. We would love to hear how your experience with Alcor cryogenic preservation was.
Yeah.
So yeah,
We'd love to interview you.
we would love to. And with that, do we got anything else?
No, that was it. That's all I got.
All right. Terrific.
Dude.
So this has been another episode of Niche Knowledge and Nonsense. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Bailey. And make sure to check out our Instagram, NKN Pod. I'm going to be posting some pictures related to the topic today. And you can also write in on email if you have anything to mention, hate mail, anything nice. All is welcome. Niche knowledge and nonsense@gmail.com. And also make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening.
Absolutely. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for listening. If you've made it this far into the episode, I just wanted to say thank you for listening all the way through. I hope you learned something new, and if you enjoyed your listen, please leave us a review wherever you're listening. You can also send us an email at nicheknowledgeandnonsense@gmail.com. Special thanks go out to Eric Sparrow for letting us use his song Cherry Crush for the intro and outro on our episodes, and also for the support we've received from friends and family. Thank you guys, and make sure to look for a new episode every 2 weeks.